this presentation, you will learn about prejudice. Social psychologists tried to define prejudice from different viewpoints. Some psychologists define prejudice as a preconceived irrational judgment, while others define it as an expression of dislike against members of some religion, race, or group. However, majority of psychologists agree upon the definition given by Secord and Bachman. Prejudice is an attitude that predisposes a person to think, perceive, feel, and act in favorable and unfavorable ways towards a group or its individual members. According to Barron and Bryan, prejudice is generally a negative attitude towards the members of some social, ethnic, or religious group. Prejudice, be it negative or positive, is decidedly an attitude and has all the three components of attitude, that is, affective, cognitive, and behavioral. Let us look at the characteristics of prejudice. Psychologists have identified the following characteristics of prejudice. Prejudice is acquired. Like attitude, prejudice is acquired through the process of learning and socialization. When born, a child is like a blank slate and is free of any kind of prejudice. It is only when the process of socialization begins that he starts imitating his parents and their likes and dislikes. Norms, values, customs, and traditions of the society of which he is a member make him prejudiced towards members of other groups. Acquisition of prejudice is facilitated by classical conditioning, instrumental and observational learning. A child learns to hate Pakistanis only because his significant others in society hate Pakistanis. This is typical of Indians. Emotional overtones. Prejudice is always colored with emotions. It is either for or against some group, community, or religion. If favorable, the person would show too much affection, love, care, and sympathy for members of another group. But if unfavorable, the person would show hatred, dislike, and hostility. Prejudice is irrational. Prejudice does not lend itself to reason, wisdom, and relevance. The individual does not change his prejudice in the face of information and evidence to the contrary. Prejudice is functional. Prejudice helps the individual justify his hostilities, repressed desires, and strengthen feelings of self-esteem and prestige. It helps individual justify his exploitation, discrimination of members of other groups. For example, in Indian society, the upper caste Hindus justified their exploitation of lower castes, reasoning that they are like that only and deserve to be exploited and discriminated against. Prejudice has no connection with reality. It is primarily based on hearsay, incomplete and wrong information, customs and traditions of the society. It can't stand the test of logic and reasoning. Let us now look at the types of prejudice. Prejudices are of different types depending upon the social conditions of the individual. Sociologists and psychologists delineate the following main types of prejudice. Racial prejudice. This is aimed at members of another race. For example, people of color have been subject of racial prejudice at the hands of whites. Similarly, Jews were a target of prejudice by Nazis in Germany. Hitler went to the extent of exterminating at a mass scale. Sex or gender prejudice. This has been on for centuries, where women have been the target of prejudice. They have been thought of as weak, dependent, and intellectually less gifted than men. Caste prejudice. The Indian social structure is the best example for such prejudice. Our society is divided into numerous castes, and each caste is believed to have specific characteristics. Language prejudice. This is often evident when we go to different parts of India. Prejudice and discrimination, particularly in South India, is very evident. People despise Hindi, knowing fully well that it is our national language. They prefer to speak English but not Hindi, even if they know Hindi. In fact, the reorganization of states in India has been on linguistic basis. Religious prejudice. This has been a burning problem in India since pre-independence days. The creation of Pakistan was only because of religious differences. In religious prejudice, individuals hold positive attitudes towards his own religion and unfavorable attitude towards the other religions. Consequently, misunderstandings and misconceptions about people of their religions crop up. Some other prejudices are political prejudice, communal prejudice, etc. I hope you now understand the concept of prejudice. Thank you for watching the presentation.